Good evening. I've already made a preliminary count. There's only 299 people here tonight. Oh, me. We have been so blessed, haven't we, with this Vacation Bible School? Fantastic attendance. More than anything, we've been blessed with great lessons. I know our kids have been blessed, and they've really enjoyed their time in their classes. But I feel like we have been doubly blessed because we've been able to be encouraged by these children and also have our own Bible classes as well. I hope that you've been encouraged by it. Growing up, my whole life, we had Vacation Bible School, and we had adult classes too. And when I got to be in those adult classes, I just relished that time together with other Christians, learning from men and what they had to say right from Scripture. And it just means a lot for us to be able to do that. I think it's a fantastic tradition for us to keep going and having these great Bible classes. Tonight, a good friend of mine, Ian Bradshaw, is here to teach our adult class on generosity. I've known Ian since around 2001 or something like that, when we were both at Harding University, and he was studying as well in the School of Biblical Studies. And Ian is a wonderful preacher, an excellent counselor. He has a counseling experience and is a licensed counselor, and actually practices some here in Batesville as well. He has preached for the Bethesda Church of Christ for about 10 years. Is that right, Ian? For about 10 years. Been coming up, lives in Searcy, but been making that drive up here to Bethesda every Sunday to serve those people. We are blessed to have him here tonight, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. Let's sing a song together, and we'll turn it right on over to Brother Ian. Number 590. 590. Jesus is all the world to me, my life, my joy, my all. He is my strength from day to day. Without him I would fall. When I am sad, to him I go. No other one can cheer me so. When I am sad, he makes me glad. He's my friend. Jesus is all the world to me, my friend in trial sore. I go to him for blessings, and he gives them o'er and o'er. He sends the sunshine and the rain. He sends the harvest, golden grain. Sunshine and rain, harvest of grain. He's my friend. Jesus is all the world to me. I want no better friend. I trust him now, I'll trust him when life's fleeting days shall end. Beautiful life with such a friend. Beautiful life that has no end. Eternal life, eternal joy. He's my friend. Ian?
Well, good evening to everybody. I'm glad to be here. Some of you recognize I was here last week. And I tried to play that off real smooth until Alex finally said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "I got my schedule mixed up." So I had a week on this, and when I walked in, my wife was real kind with me about it. Jamie, she's with me tonight. My daughter Eve, my other kids are doing some summer camp things. But she said, VBS is not tonight, and I'm not going to let you live that down. So I'm grateful to be here. I send greetings from Bethesda. As Alex said, we've been going up there for about 10 years. And, the plan initially with that, in 2008, we moved back to Arkansas. I was just going to fill in a few Sundays. And that congregation there became family. They loved us, and we loved them. And we're going to keep being there until the Lord changes things. But some of those folks are here tonight. I'm thankful for that support as well. We've been very blessed, very blessed. I was thinking about that, Alex, about 17 years ago is when I met him. And I remember him preaching in our expository preaching class, and you've got a great preacher. You've got a great person serving you here. I saw that fire within his bones, and I imagine he hasn't lost any of that. So I was grateful to reconnect with him when I came back up here to Batesville to also set up a counseling practice. And that feeds the lesson tonight. Really, you don't know all your experiences in life serve until you're at a place and you look back and you're able to say, well, now that kind of makes sense, that kind of makes sense, and that kind of makes sense. You start seeing the dots connect when often we're praying in the moment, we wish we could understand what was going on. Isn't that right? We get to places in our life where we have different questions about what God may be calling us to do. And I look back, never thought I would have been a preacher when I was younger. Never thought I would have been a counselor. And yet God's got me doing both of those things. We don't know what God has in store for us. We don't know what He thinks about what we do in our life. And we don't know always how big of a deal what we're doing is. And that's why I love this story of the widow over in Luke chapter 20, at the end of chapter 20 and in 21. Because it's a story about a woman that could have easily been looked over and kind of maybe even in the way at times. And some of us sometimes may feel that way, like maybe we're all used up. And we wonder if what we're doing, if it matters a whole lot. And yet there's the Lord watching what's going on with her. And I love that because God sees certain things that often you and I don't see. And God often praises things in our life that you and I think, oh, well, anybody might do that, when that might not be the case at all. And so as we get into this lesson tonight, I want you to think about what things maybe in your life God's looking at and giving great note to, because you may be thinking, well, everybody's just a dad and takes care of their kids. That's not so. I work with kids that don't know who their father is. Or everybody's just a good mom and cooks and, helps get to bed and helps wake them up and clean them up and wash their clothes. That's not so. I work with a lot of young kids that have never known their mom, or they had parents that never did anything near to that. I work with adults at times that have significant trauma in their life that never had that sort of loving care. Never had a parent that got up every day and went to work. Now, I know the adversary wants you to think, a lot of times he wants you to think that a lot of what you do in your life is not that big of a deal, is not going to have that big of an impact in their life. And so I want you to pay special attention to this passage tonight. Because of all the people that the Lord could have set His eyes on with what was going on at the temple, He picks this widow who is in no doubt a bad situation financially. She's alone. And He points her out to write down, and 2,000 plus years later, here you and I are reading her story. What sort of story are you passing on? What sort of legacy are you passing on? Lots of thoughts today about Christianity. Lots of thoughts. Some tolerate the discussion today. Some don't. Some absolutely do not. Some will tolerate more the discussion of God until you get to the point of talking about Jesus, and that's when you'll see whether they really tolerate the discussion of Christianity or not. Some don't care, but some do. Some do. You all here tonight are here because you care. And we need more people to care. The giving topic has been one that's had a lot of taboo. I'm still young, compared to a lot of folks, but I'm old enough to remember back during the 80s when all the televangelists would always, put on that good show. And I remember being impressed even when I was a kid and talking about giving, and folks would give because they think God would bless them, and then to come find out it was a big scam or something like that. And then as you see the tape fast forwarded to now, whenever you hear that topic of giving come up, people always kind of, what's this about? What are we going to use those funds for or whatever? Giving is a big deal. Because a lot of times we feel like it's just taking. Well, with God, we got to understand His perspective. Giving has always been a characteristic of the people of God. People in the Old Testament, they gave a tithe of what they had because they felt blessed in their life. For those that remembered famine, when they were blessed in their life, they were grateful to give. They were grateful to have an opportunity to praise God and give back. But then there was times when they forgot what the famine was like, and they gave just because they thought they had to, and they forgot how big of a deal it was to be blessed by God. And not only that, to be loved by the Creator of the universe. And over in the New Covenant, in the New Testament, 2 Corinthians 9:7, where when we give, we don't need to give reluctantly or out of compulsion. We give out of the goodness of our heart. And that's why I love always going back to the parable of Jesus and studying and seeing how Jesus always emphasized the matters of the heart. And really when we talk about a life of giving, that's what we're talking about. We look at the world around us today, and I think it's fair to say we've got to be concerned about the condition of many people's hearts and what the implications of that are for us. The best question as we come to this text is really to ask, what's giving all about? Is it about money? Is it about material things? Or is it more? Is it more? And then beyond that, why give? Why give to God? Especially if I feel that maybe I've been shortchanged in some areas of my life. Or I don't fully understand what all God wants for me in my life. Or I still have a beef to pick with God because of some things that have happened in my life. Or I've been too wicked. God doesn't need any contribution from me anyways. I've talked to a lot of people like that. He can use better people than me. Why serve Him at all? And to answer that, we've got this story here in Luke. So if you would, read with me, starting in Luke chapter 20. And we'll start in verse 45 and then read into chapter 21. And while all the people were listening, he said to the disciples, "Beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes and love respectful greetings in the marketplaces and chief seats in the synagogues and places of honor at banquets, who devour widows' houses, and for appearance sake offer long prayers. These will receive greater condemnation." And then he looked up, and he saw the rich putting their gifts into the treasury. And he saw a poor widow putting in 2 small copper coins. And he said, "Truly I say to you, this poor widow put in more than all of them. For they out of their surplus put into the offering, but she out of her poverty put in all that she had to live on." All that she had to live on. A little bit of background here with the Gospel of Luke. I love the Gospel of Luke. Luke is, we know, a physician, and so he gets very technical with what he describes. He writes in a different way, different than Mark, different than Matthew, different than John, as well as those 3 writing different from one another. But Luke gets very technical, and he's very good on details, and he shows a lot of events throughout this Gospel that surround money and material things. And these 2 things impact all of us. You're here tonight because you had the money to get here and you had some material things to get here. This building's here because of money and material things. We exist in a life with money and material things. Some of you are very grateful right now because when you go back to your home tonight, you've got a material thing called an air conditioner and you've got that sucker on. I grew up in White County in Rosebud. I didn't have air conditioning until I was 16. I tell my friends they looked at me like I was crazy. But I remember once we got it, you can never go back. Boy, I don't know if I could go back. But material things. We get blessed by material things. And that's okay to say that. But what do we do with it? Now, Luke records Jesus doing a lot of things around these topics, and we've got to listen to them. Cleansing the temple, Luke chapter 19. He had enough of them misusing God's house. Cleanse the temple. Entrapment, when the Sadducees are trying to trap him around what Roman taxes is, and he says, "Render to Caesar what is Caesar's and God's God's." When the Sadducees also question him about the resurrection. Again, Sadducees focused on material things, very political, very materialistic group of people, all related to money and material things. We see Luke emphasizing a lot of misuse of the temple. A lot of people using certain parts of the temple that were designated originally for other parts, where the Gentiles were, or where the women's court was, we see being offered in a way that's to make money for people. And the Lord has a big issue with this because they lost the holiness of what serving God was about. Took Him for granted. And at this time, you've got areas in the temple where you would go up and you would offer your treasury. There's about 12 different boxes in the shape of a trumpet, and you could throw your money in there. And they were designed, as you threw your money in these boxes, to be able to tell how much was in that box by the sound of it. So folks could know if there was enough, if it met what that certain tax was. And this is what the widow's going up and throwing her 2 mites in. Jesus is watching. He's watching everyone here. And without a doubt, he knows that there's a poverty going on in this woman's life. She's destitute, often widows at this time when they were in that place, because we see later on where Paul's going to be talking to the church saying you've got to support the widows, we've got to take care of the widows. The Lord has always had a thing for orphans and widows. He's always had a thing for those that were fatherless and those that were widows. He always has commanded his people to take care of them and not to neglect them. He knows that they're in a bad situation. So I'm not surprised here that he sees her and pays attention. And what I love is that in earshot, he makes a warning about abusing widows. Focusing on this woman coming up to the box, and she's serious about her contribution. Whenever I read passages like this, I always try to think about somebody who that might remind me of. Now, my own mother's a widow. I thought about her. I also thought about this sister that I used to know in Rosebud who knew the Bible. Boy, she knew the Bible. Alex and I went to preaching school, but it's like she would have been one of those folks that established it. She knew the Bible. And she prayed for her family, and she loved on us, and she'd also let you know when you stepped out of line. Y'all have some sisters like that, I bet, around here, but it was out of love, and just encouragement to be able to help you be right with God. And she would always be praying for her son to come back to church. I remember that. And then she would bring as many people as she could grab. You never knew when there was visitors coming, who was there. But usually they were connected to Sister Nellie. And I remember when they found her and she passed away, they found her beside her bed, and she was in the praying position. And the Lord came at that point and took her home. I don't know of a better way to go, folks. Can you think of a better way? I don't know of a better way to go. And when we lost her, we lost a big part of our family there. But she didn't have much. She didn't have a big old mansion, and we're not going to knock people who do, but what was big about her was her heart. It was her heart, her impact, and that she was serious. She was serious about serving God. And this widow is serious about serving God. And she's going to give, and she's going to give all that she has. You're going to see Jesus emphasize that. And what I love about it, again, is that she's there giving these 2 mites, which are going to equal about a cent. And the Lord's going to say that's all that she has. And I don't know that she knows He sees her. And I love that about the God that we serve. Because there's times in our lives, as I said earlier, we're doing certain things and we're going through maybe a same routine and we're going through something that may be pain or be sacrificial for us, and we wonder, does it matter? Well, if Jesus is looking at her, seeing her give 2 mites, which equal about a cent, what you give in your life matters. What you give in your life matters. How we give matters. Here He is looking at just little old her, and she's giving all. She's giving all. Have you ever done this? You ever gave all? I played basketball. As soon as the coaches in my school saw my height and I was clumsy as all get out, they didn't care. They're going to put me down low. Just stay there, son. That was where I was supposed to be. Just stay down low. Don't go out to the three-point line. Just stay down low. I wanted to be like a white Michael Jordan, go out to the three-point line and develop my game, but they wouldn't let me. Stay down there low because I was tall, played basketball. And when you went out there and you gave half-hearted effort, people noticed. And when you gave out there and you gave all, people noticed. And they would say that he gave it all out on the court. For my football friends, they gave it all out on the field. And even if you lose a game and you've left it all out on the field, people are proud of that effort, aren't they? Because you gave it all. Or for you fighting fans, when you see a boxer go out there, even if they get beat and they leave it all out there, you'll hear that terminology. They gave it all out there. They gave it all. When you hear people talk about how much they give, and they said, man, I gave all of it. I gave every bit that I could give. It moves us when we see that. It moves us when we see somebody go beyond the norm and they give all. They put it out there. They give all. I hear stories from people who admire their parents who never really went into retirement, but they worked and they worked their whole life. And I hear stories about that. Maybe they didn't have a whole lot again, but they loved their parents. They respected them because they gave every bit of what they could. Each day, they did the best they could. They gave all. They gave all. War heroes. When we hear about people who've come back from war, I've got a lot of veterans in my family. My grandfather, who actually grew up in Batesville, my great-grandfather helped build the roads to Eureka Springs and some of the roads back here every 4th of July. They would go up to the spring mill, and they would watch the fireworks go, and they'd buy a case of strawberries in the water there. It's no wonder that I'm up here. I've got heritage. My great-grandfather, he raised my grandfather in this area, and then he went into World War II. My father also served in Vietnam. My uncle, retired Command Master Chief. I had an uncle on the left of me growing up that was in the Air Force. Uncle on the right of me growing up that was in the Air Force. I felt like I was on a little military base growing up. You couldn't get away with much. And there was always this honor about people who gave all. And I would always remember stories. Not too long ago, you all saw when that movie Unbroken came out about Louis Zamperini, who was 47 days during World War II lost at sea. 47 days. And then beyond that, he was 2 years a POW in Japan. And we know many of our military heroes don't come back. He came back. He came back. And when he came back, he had to work through some of his demons, but he did. And eventually he turned things around and he offered forgiveness for all sorts of people in his life. After he got forgiveness, after you have that mercy touch you, you want to in turn touch other people. And he even got to the point he was ready to forgive, and he did forgive. He wanted to tell him personally his worst captor. But that man would not meet with him in Japan. Or there was another movie that came out, Hacksaw Ridge. Private First Class Desmond Doss, who in the second bloodiest battle of World War II in Okinawa, saved, and they say it was around 75 men. He was very humble. He said it was about 50. His soldier brothers would say it was around 100, so they just went around to 75. He kept going back into fierce battle and saving as many people as he can. And the famous quote that came from his life was, "Lord, just help me save one more. Just help me save one more." Did he set out to be a hero? No. But we admire that. We admire people that have put themselves out there. Man, they laid it all on the line. They put it all out there. It brings to mind this following phrase I've seen time and time again when you get around a military graveyard or memorials where it says, all gave some and some gave what? All. And we know what that means. When you've been in a battle and you come back, there's often a part of you that don't come back. And we're grateful for that. We're grateful for people who put it out there for our police, for our EMTs, our firefighters, for people that are in any capacity going out and trying to help people in rough situations. We're always grateful because they're putting it out there, and we see that. They're laying it all out there. But I get the question, Ian, what if I didn't go to war? What if my battle is not known? It's not a big-time event. Maybe it doesn't matter. That's what some of us often let the adversary think, that what we're doing in our life, it doesn't matter. And we might feel like all that we're given is, maybe just 2 mites, but maybe you're given all that you have. And does God notice it? The answer is yes. What you do in your life matters as a child of God. God loves it because it brings glory to His name. Absolutely. He loves it. But also He loves it because when you were created with a purpose. You weren't an accident, even if your parents tell you that. You were created with a purpose. You're meant to be here. And there's a reason that you're here, and there's not anybody else right now or ever has been that's just like you. God intends for you to be here and for your life to matter. And the things that we do matter. I think of a dear friend of mine whose mother passed away. I went to the funeral recently and saw all the brothers. She had 4 boys, and growing up, they didn't have a whole lot. But I remember that, and then she had a set of twins, and one of the twins came down with leukemia. She would take him to St. Jude's regularly. And as a kid, you didn't really understand a whole lot what that was about. I just knew there was a lot of stress in that house. But she always had a smile on her face. Always had a smile on her face. And when I went over there, boy, she feed me good too. I'll never forget that. And they were always amazed because I was super skinny back then. And they'd always come watch me eat. I could eat whatever she put in front of me. And they loved to give, and they didn't have a whole lot. And I remember her oldest son, who was one of my best friends at that time, talking to me that she was needing some personal items at one time. And he went in and he was asking her about this Nerf gun, or it was a toy like that, something he didn't need. And then she went into the store, and he thought she was going to get what she needed. That was what he wanted. And she came out with that toy and gave it to her son. He said, I'll never forget that. Now, do you think that sort of action matters before God? Absolutely. My own father passed away when I was 16. He'd get up every morning at 4:30. And again, we didn't have air conditioning, and we sure didn't have electrical heat. We had a wood stove. Some of you know what I mean by that, and there's nothing like a wood fire. And I remember hearing, first thing in the morning, the sound of that stove open up, the clanking around, and the roar of that fireplace start to get going. And I love hearing that. Now, my room was the furthest away, so I stayed in my bed longer than anybody else because it took a while for that heat to get back there. But it's easy as a kid to take that for granted. Well, that's what every dad does, right? No. That's what he did. And now that I'm older and have kids of my own and know what it's like to have to get up and go to work tired and have to do things at times when you don't feel like it, what an example. What a gift. What a gift. He gave all. So Ian, you're emphasizing about the widow's mite and money, and then you're talking about parenting and what we're doing in our everyday lives because what we give matters. Some of us think our giving only relates to the amount of dollars we put in the collection plate on Sunday. Giving to God has always been beyond that. Now, I'm not saying that's not a big deal. It is. We need to have the lights on. We need to be able to help with ministries and whatnot. But we've let the adversary discourage us at times from other areas in our life because maybe it's not popularized in media or in the pop culture. But being a family, that takes effort. Raising kids, that's one of the hardest jobs, if not the hardest job in the world, if you care. And parents, you're the greatest asset that you'll ever be in your children's lives. Even if they're teenagers right now, they don't want to talk to you, and they've blocked out their social media, you still matter more than anything else in their life. They're going to get over that phase, by the way, because you did. We are at a place in time where we've got to recognize what we give in our Christian walk, it matters. Or else we're going to get to a point where we throw our hands up and we say, I really don't matter. Somebody else can do it. This widow didn't get to that place. I don't know if she ever was, though. I don't know if she ever was in a place where maybe she had a tough season in her life, maybe like Naomi did. Naomi was in a tough place at one time. Do y'all remember that with Naomi where she got to a place and she said, God, just change my name tomorrow, which means bitter because you've taken my husband and my sons. And she had enough. And then with Job got to a place, Job was a good man. Job was offering sacrifices for his kids. In our time, that would have meant like he was bringing his kids to church. They're sitting in here. They would have been participating all around us. And then we would have heard a story of where they were lost in a tragic accident like what we heard last weekend up in Branson. How do you live through that? And we need to be praying for that family. And not just that family, but all of them. But 9 people? My goodness. Job got to a place where he said, God, you come down here and get before me and let you and me have a talk. I know you're God, but I'm in my stuff right now. I'm in my frustration, my hurt, my loss. He was frustrated. Does my life not matter? Does all this not matter? Where are you, Lord? That was basically the question he was asking. Where are you? And then his friends come along, which weren't that great friends, and said, you probably got sin in your life, and this is why that happened. Not what you needed to tell somebody when they were in grief. How do we get to that place where we can give all? How do we encourage those who are single parents and trying to give their kids everything? And they're not just playing a role of a mom, but they're playing a role of a mom and a dad. And they're doing the best they can, and they're frustrated. And sometimes when their kids may show up, they might be a little rowdy. That just makes sense in that moment. I'm having to a lot of times tell parents, you're doing a good job. Not. They often feel like they're coming up short. Work, when we're doing the best we can, and we're trying to get that acknowledgement, and that promotion goes over our head, and we think, oh, golly, God, what is the point of all this? Or maybe you've got 2 parents working like I grew up, and you're a latchkey kid, and you're doing the best you can to take care of your family and raise your family in a godly Christian way in this world. Or you're shy. and you're a bit introverted, and you're at a place where you want to do more with the church, but you just don't know if you can, and you don't realize your presence, just being here, matters greatly. Your presence here matters greatly. If God saw her, He sees you. He sees you right now, right here, because you matter. So what is true giving? What is true giving? We know this. True giving, that giving is a serious matter before God, and that giving, it often tests our faith. We are in a place when we're giving, especially when we're giving our all, and we're living a life for God, we're giving our all. Friends, it's a test of our faith, and it's a test of, do you really believe God's going to supply your needs? Do you really believe that? Do you really believe God's going to take care of you? If tomorrow the tragedy happened and tragedy struck, God forbid that happened to anybody in this room, but if it did, we would really believe God would take care of us. That God would show up and supply all of our needs. What do we believe? Some have missed this point with giving. Some people make it a pride point, like what Jesus was hitting on with the scribes and the Pharisees. It was easy for them to give, and when they gave to curry favor. I remember one time being part of a door-knocking campaign, and we needed people there to go knock doors, and this one fellow who was a very good businessman, and again, I'm not knocking businessmen, this is just this particular fellow, but he was very wealthy, and instead of him coming, he wrote a check and he sent a check, as that could replace him. We needed people. Some give for ulterior motives. Some give for favor. Some give for control. Some give for popularity. Some give for power. We know this already because we see it happen in the political arena. We see it happen at work. We see it happen all around us. But just because it happens around us doesn't mean that's what you and I have to do. That doesn't mean you and I follow in suit. True giving, if you say, Ian, what is it simply? What is true giving? True giving is you giving without an ulterior motive. There's nothing you want in return. You're giving because you desire to give. When I'm working with couples and we've got marital conflict going on, and often it gets into a power struggle back and forth, I move to that place of giving with them, and I've got to get them back to that place of giving. Because when you dated, and you were together, and maybe there was an ulterior motive because you wanted her to like you, right? But there was a point where you loved, that love was growing, and it's like I gave because I loved. I gave because they were special to me. I gave because that's what you're supposed to do, Ian. And when you get couples that go back to that, I've seen healing with all sorts of different traumas that have happened in relationships. Think of a marriage where giving happens back and forth and there's no ulterior motive. We give because that's what our heart is about. Think about that as a parent, as we're giving to our kids. Again, within means, but we're giving, and then kids are giving back, getting their chores done, not so that they can get the next upgrade on their iPhone, but they're giving because they appreciate their parents. You think of a job where you give and you do your job because you're grateful to have a job. And I'll tell you, for those that work in jobs or bosses notice, receive it. Because I'll often see where people will give, and then when somebody tries to give them a compliment, they just kind of let it roll off their back. They don't receive it. God wanted this woman to be noticed. When you and I give and people notice that, that's an opportunity for us to give glory to God. With where we're at in our life, we wouldn't be where we're at without God helping us. In the community, if there was no ulterior motive, what would true giving look like? And our giving is about really just paying it forward. Paul writes to the church in Galatians there, and he says in 6 and 10, that we're to do good to all people, especially those of the household of faith. What's that mean, to do good to all people? That means to be living in a life of giving. You may not have a lot of money, but you know how to fix a lawnmower. Is that giving? You better believe it to the person whose lawnmower just broke down. We can give in all sorts of capacity. I once heard a fellow that he said, I didn't know how to do much, Ian, so I took on the church ministry of changing light bulbs. Somebody's got to do that. Look at these light bulbs in here. Who wants to climb up there and get those done? The people that do that, they're giving. He gave of what he could. And he not only did it in the church building, he went to widows' homes and he went to people that he knew were disabled, and he would give. He would give of his time. He would give of his effort. I remember when I first started preaching, Sister Noreen Shoemate, I've still got 2 of her quilts. She would always come in with 2 crutches. And sometimes she had broken feet. She had neuropathy, so she couldn't always feel what was going on with her feet. She couldn't feel the pain, is what I mean by that. And she'd come in and she'd say, Ian, stop by the house. Yes, ma'am. I'd stop by the house afterwards, and then one day she gives me this quilt. One of the most comfortable quilts I've ever had. I didn't expect that at all. Then another time, there was another quilt. Then she got to know me better and found out I love pecan pie, and one day it was a pecan pie. Did she bless me? More than she could imagine. She gave out of her means. She gave out of what she could give. What is it that you and I can give? That's the question. What is it that we are blessed in, that we can give? And even if not fully blessed where we think we have a surplus of it, but just we have the talent, we have the ability, what can we give in our life? Because we've got to take that from this story. We've got to take that it was not just what she gave. We can say, boy, she didn't have a whole lot of money, and that was a big deal. It was a big deal. But the bigger lesson here was the condition of her heart. We're not told the hardships that she had to endure. When you find stories of widows throughout Scripture, sometimes they're quite heartbreaking. Again, I brought up Naomi a moment ago, but there's another widow that Elijah ran into that she was preparing her final meal. And you remember what God told Elijah? Go to her and tell her to make you a meal. And she was out gathering sticks there in 1 Kings 17, and that was her last meal. She didn't have any more to give. And when he showed up and said, please make me a meal, just shout out, not knowing her condition, she said, you bet I'll do it. You bet I'll do it. In the name of the Lord, I'll make you this meal. But she said, I may not be able to make you some bread because I've only got so much flour. He said, you go do that. And then God made it to where her oil and her bread didn't run out. For those of us that have been able to lean and have been Christians a little bit, and we've been able to lean in our faith for an amount of time, there's been times where you have given and God showed up, didn't He? God showed up and He provided and He took care of you. And if He does it for her, if He does it for the widow there in 1 Kings 17, and He does it for you once, He can do it again. And not only can He do it, He will do it. Because God's not going to let you and I go without what we need in our life. That's a promise from Him. Jesus is on the Sermon on the Mount talking to all these people that are broke down, frustrated. They're wondering about, if the Messiah is going to come again. They hear about this guy Jesus, and He looks out to them, these people that are maybe not very literate as well, and He says, you're the light of the world. You're the salt of the earth. You're going to go out and make a difference. And then at the end of that chapter, He goes on to say, don't worry about tomorrow, but seek my kingdom first and my righteousness, and what? Everything. All these things will be added unto you. Where do you go to hear a message like that? We hear something like that today, we think, man, that sounds too good to be true. That sounds kind of like those 80s televangelists again. This is the Son of God saying, for those of us that are brave enough to give all that we have in our life and to lean in and become and grow in the grace and mercy that Jesus Christ is calling us to grow in, that everything you need in your life will be supplied. Everything you need in your life will happen. But you either believe that or you don't. I imagine the years that she had on this earth, she had some hardships. But at this point, it did not stop her. It didn't stop her. I get asked a lot today, why do people stay motivated? And what happens to people who lose that motivation to be a Christian? I like music. When I first met my wife, I had no job. I had a truck. My hair was bleached, and I was an aspiring musician. I have no idea why her dad even let me date her. I would not have let me date her as a dad. But he saw something in me. He was a Barnabas. He's now down in Houston helping people rebuild that from the flood, and that's just the sort of guy he is. I'm not surprised. He was a big part of me coming to the Lord. But I've always liked music, and I listen to different types of music. One of my favorite bands today is Mercy Me. Some of you have seen that movie, I Can Only Imagine. So that was the story of the lead singer there. But they've got a new song out that says, Even If. And there's a lyric in it that says, I know you're able, and I know you can, save me through the fire with your mighty hand. But even if you don't, my hope is you alone. Even if you don't, my hope is you alone. There's another songwriter by the name Natalie Grant. I like a lot of her songs, and she's got one song that's entitled More Than Anything, and the chorus of it is, help me want the healer more than the healing. Help me want the Savior more than the saving. Help me want you more than anything. More than anything. Some of us have got to ask ourselves, am I a Christian because of what I can get out of God? Am I a Christian just so I can get heaven? Or I can just get forgiveness? Is this about what I can get from Him? Or am I a Christian because of the love? How do you comprehend? How do you comprehend? How do you fathom that somebody loved you at the worst in your life and they still died for you? How do we comprehend that? We can't give it back. There's no debt, no sweat plan for that, folks. Dave Ramsey's principles are pretty good, but you won't get out of debt when it comes to that. You can't pay that back. Okay. So, what is the condition of my heart? The condition of our heart is going to reflect whether I give and how I live. The condition of my heart is going to be reflected in the generosity that I have. I'll wrap this up just with a story. Truth is truth no matter where it comes from. And I'm impressed with this little lady who served in Calcutta for over 50 years, Teresa of Calcutta. Some of you have heard of her story. Regardless of what she believes doctrinally, you've got to admire what she's done with her, what she did with her life. She served people that other people didn't want to touch. She served people that had leprosy, AIDS, and when she was asked about why she served and why she was doing what she did, she said these people deserve to die in dignity. But there was times that she was very frustrated, times she was very discouraged because, you see a lot of depravity around you. You and I can see a lot of depravity around us. And you've got to ask, how do you pull through something like that? And she had this poem, this mural, that I'll close with us on. As we think about giving and what it is to live and give with a heart that's truly devoted to God. And the title of it's Anyway. This was said to be written on her wall where she lived. People are often unreasonable and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you are kind, people may accuse you of ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. If you are successful, you will win some false friends and some enemies. Succeed anyway. If you are honest, people may cheat you, but be honest anyway. What you spend years building, someone could destroy overnight. Build anyway. If you find serenity and happiness, they may be jealous. Be happy anyway. The good you do today, people often forget tomorrow, but do good anyway. You give the world your best, it may never be enough, but give anyway. You see, in the final analysis, it was between you and God. It was never between you and them anyway. Thank you for having me.